afternoon, everyone. Another day, another topic today. So, we're going to talk about consequences today. Because it feels like consequences, there ain't too many people that have to deal with consequences. Consequences, whether they be good or bad, are just part of life, part of the decisions that you make or don't make. And when you make decisions or don't make decisions, there are consequences, whether they're good or bad. So I've noticed a lot in the world we live in now, there are no consequences for what people do, or there are consequences for only certain people. That's a little bit more accurate. So what happens is that if you hold a certain ideology, if you hold a certain political leaning, or if you're even a certain color for that matter, a certain race, you're held to a different standard and there are consequences for you. But when other ideologies or political whatever or different races do the exact same thing, there are no consequences. And it goes both ways, depending on the subject, depending on what we're talking about. So when people speak out about certain things that don't necessarily agree with the mainline thinking, if that's what you want to call it, well, let me rephrase it, with the media thinking, then there are consequences for your speech. You are banned, you are canceled, you are taken off social media, the whole 9 yards. But if your thinking is in line with what the media thinks, you could say whatever you want, regardless of how vulgar or wrong that it is, and you're going to get away with it. You're going to get away with it. So it just really depends. Consequences aren't always bad, but for the most part, they are. Okay? Consequences, and I bring this up because if you've watched the news or anything like that, and again, I apologize for the camera, I'm driving, these roads aren't very good. The firing of, I think, of at least 3 news personalities from 3 different news organizations. I think one was NBC, one CNN, and one at Fox. So there were consequences for whatever they were fired for, and I don't know all the details on it. I don't watch news like that very much. But for whatever reason they were fired, there were consequences for whatever they did or didn't do, or consequences are also reactions to perceived things, unfortunately. Because in our current society, you're guilty until proven innocent, even though our justice system says differently. So I brought this up because of those 3 news personalities that were fired. A question came up from somebody online. Well, heck, we should maybe do the same thing in the Christian arena. And I would tend to agree with that. There are a lot of people in the Christian arena that have done things similarly, but nothing has happened to them. Even though we're supposed to be held to a higher standard. As Christians and or saints, because I do separate the two. But especially saints, we're held to a higher standard. And because we're held to a higher standard, that means that because of that higher standard, the consequences are more, I shouldn't say severe, but they're more in line to happen much more readily than they do in the world. Because again, we're all supposed to agree that the Bible specifies, punishments for, bad decisions that we make. But even if we were to go the same route as the world does and just use the justice system like it should be, which we don't, then there still are consequences for what's done, even in the church sphere of influence. Because there are a lot of people out there that say that, as Christians and or saints, that we should be so ready to take folks to court, that there is a different way to handle issues and problems. And I would agree with that. We should be so readily ready to take somebody to court, sue them, and take all their money, possessions, and everything else. That we should be able to come together as grown adults and be able to hash things out. And then when you can't hash things out, when you've exhausted all the common sense methods of conflict resolution, then you take it to court. But that's not what we do in this world. That's not what we do in the church. Because the church is too much like the world now. So we just go straight to court. We go straight to legal issues. Hence, why our court system's all messed up, because there's just too much, put on it to be able to handle things, and a lot of it could be handled by just being grown adults and sitting down and hashing stuff out, and just giving some people due process and honoring contracts, and those type of things. Even honoring your word. If we would just do that, shoot, the court systems would probably, half the stuff would be the court systems. But the world doesn't believe in your people's word anymore, because too many people lie. Too many people are fake and fickle, as I explained in other videos prior, in a previous video. So because of that, there really aren't consequences anymore for what certain people do. If you are in line with what the media is spouting, then there are no consequences for you, regardless of what race or ideology you are. But if you do things that the media is not in line with, then there are consequences for you, for what you say, for what you do, for what you're perceived to be doing, for what race you are, so on. There are consequences. And that's what's wrong with the world today, that there are only consequences for certain parts of society and not others. No consequences. There are no consequences. And that's part of the problem we have in this world, is there are no consequences for some. And that's why this world is messed up. That's why our government is messed up. Because there are no consequences. That we, the people in this particular country, because I can only speak for this country that I live in, aren't holding our government accountable for what they do. So hence there are no consequences for what they do. Because we are allowing our government to do whatever they want to, because we're not holding government accountable. But we are seeing that there are other areas that are being held accountable. For instance, the quote-unquote boycott of Bud Light for using, transgender or something or other. Okay? Now, I don't agree with the LGBTQ movement at all. I don't. They're free to live their life whichever way they see fit, and that's fine. I don't have to agree with it. And nor do I agree with them pushing their ideals on me. Live your life, and that's great. The government allows you to be free and live your life wherever you see fit, and that has nothing to do with me. I have nothing to do with you, and great, we can move along. But that's not what's going on. We as a society are being pushed to believe in ideologies that we individually don't believe in. And And if we say something about it, there are consequences. But there are no consequences for them pushing something that's against the Constitution, because we all have the freedom to believe what we want to believe. There are no consequences for them, but there are consequences for us who disagree with it. It's called hypocritical. And our government is turned hypocritical. Our government, our media, everything else is turned hypocritical. We don't believe in the freedom of speech and the freedom of thought anymore. And that's part of the problem. So I say that because the boycott of Bud Light for that has caused, and there have been consequences. People have left or have been fired, and Bud Light as a brand has lost millions and millions of dollars. So there are consequences for accepting an ideology which the majority of the people who buy your product don't believe in, regardless if you agree with it or not. Bud Light, a subsidiary of Anheuser-Busch, which is also a subsidiary of something else, has the right to do whatever they want. They're a private company. No problem with that. In all honesty, if they wanted to, put whatever they want to on their can or promote whatever they want to, that's their business. They're a private company. They can do whatever they want. I'm all for private companies being able to run their companies the way they see fit, because they're a private company. They're not a public entity which has different standards. A private company is not beholden to the same things that a publicly run company are. The government can mandate things that a private company doesn't have to, because it's private. If I choose not to serve certain people in society, then as a private company, I'm allowed to do that. Now, will there be consequences? Sure, there will be consequences, but not from the government, nor should there be, because I'm a private company. I can hire whomever I want to hire. And if I don't agree with that person that has filled out my application, I have every right to not hire them and turn them down, because I'm a private company. The Constitution was never written for private companies. Now, the Constitution does apply to everybody, but when it comes to the same standards that public companies have, it's totally different. But that's not what's happening. So I have no problem with Bud Light doing whatever they want to do. I don't drink, so I don't even care. But the people who drink Bud Light, it seems to me, didn't like the move that they made, so they boycotted it. Now, of course, there's some political things going on, and so more than just Bud Light drinkers are boycotting it. I get it. They're trying to prove a point. They're trying to make a point. They're trying to make a statement. Okay, whatever. But the consequences of them doing that has meant millions of dollars in lost profit, and I believe 2 executives either being fired or leaving. And they're the executives that started this whole thing in the first place, if I'm correct. So there are consequences. There are consequences for what people do. And I still believe that the regular Joe Blow citizen of the United States is still the majority of this country, don't really believe in what, one, the media is telling you, the news is telling, the media as a whole, and the government in its current form. But most of them are too afraid to say anything. But when they finally do say something, or when they finally do something, then they show their power. Consequences. Again, you can think that the boycott is silly. Yes, is the boycott politically motivated? Of course it is. Just like just about everything in this world society is, especially in this country. but there were consequences. They probably thought when they did it that there would be positive consequences. And maybe initially there were positive consequences. But it didn't turn out that way. It didn't turn out that way. It didn't turn out that way. People that say the wrong things, especially on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all these other things, if they don't say what's quote unquote considered mainstream now, then they get canceled and taken off, blocked. Sometimes taken off the platform altogether, like President Trump did. We were so concerned about what he says and his opinions that we denied him his constitutional rights of free speech. And you don't have to agree with him. That's fine. But that just lets you know that none of these social media platforms that we are on believe in free speech, or they only believe in free speech for the ones that they agree with. And it took somebody else buying Twitter for President Trump to be able to get back on social media, on Twitter at least. That's sad. You don't have to agree with the man. That's your business. You can call him whatever you want to, but he has just as much of a right to say something as we do. And so what's happening is that the media is taking away the rights of individuals because they don't agree with them. And that's not right. But they can do that because they have the power to do that, and the government's allowing them to do that. And I'm not a fan of a lot of regulation. But the government is supposed to regulate companies when they take away basic constitutional rights. The government is supposed to step in. Other than that, the government needs to leave businesses, private businesses alone. But when you are taking away basic constitutional rights, freedom of speech, expression, religion, those type of things, and that's when the government needs to get involved. Other than that, government needs to stay out of business. Let the businesses do what they do. If they fail, they fail. If they're successful, they're successful. Consequences. We don't believe in having consequences. The government bailing out banks is the wrong move, because of the simple fact is that there are consequences for bad business practices or a lack of business practices. There are consequences. There are consequences for not, and coming from a church perspective, there are consequences for not giving your life to Christ. There are consequences. There are consequences if you do. There are consequences when you do something you shouldn't do. When you commit a crime, there are consequences. When you're hurtful to someone, there are consequences. When you treat somebody badly, there should be consequences, but in a lot of cases, they're not. Consequences are all a part of society. It's a part of decision making. Consequences are the reaction to decision making. Things that we do, things that we just say, there are consequences. And so we need to understand that anything we do and say, there are going to be consequences. And we need to be man and woman enough to take it, because they're coming. They may not come immediately, but they're coming. So I'm going to end the video right there. I'll just do a little talk about consequences. We may visit it again, but consequences are all part of decisions that an individual makes. any decision that we make has consequences. But unfortunately, only certain people have to experience consequences and others don't. And therein lies the problem. So let's think about that. If you have an opinion, leave a comment below. As always, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Share it. Share this with others. And again, if you have a comment, by all means, leave it down below. Visit my son's website. Website will be in the description. And hopefully I'll be talking to y'all again here tomorrow. So until then, God bless.